Alhamdulillahi wahdah wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'dah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi alladhina awfu ahdah. Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah number 1, chapter number 1. The Quran is comprised of Surah Al-Fatiha and 30 juz, 30 chapters. The word Fatiha is derived from the word Fathun, which means to open. As the Quran begins and opens with this surah, it was named Surah Al-Fatiha. This surah is also properly known as Quran, the summary of the Quran. Summary of the Quran. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken in detail regarding 6 fundamental subjects. Number 1, the oneness is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 2, prophethood. Number 3, the day of judgment, the doomsday. Number 4, commands and rulings. Number 5, the believers. And number 6, the disbelievers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has summarized all of these six subjects in Surah Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim is explaining the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maliki Yawmiddin is regarding the day of judgment. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een is in relation to command and rulings. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim is referring to prophethood and the believers. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin is referring to the disbelievers. This surah uses the same term for all believers, alladhina an'amta alayhim, whereas for the disbelievers, 2 separate terms are used to describe them. Number 1, dhal, number 2, maghdub. The one who disbelieves due to pride and stubbornness, they are included under those who earn the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like the Jews. And those who disbelieved due to ignorance and not knowing, they are those who went astray, like the Christians. Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah number 2, chapter number 1. Baqarah in the Arabic language means cow. In this surah, there is mention of a cow and the incident regarding it. Therefore, it is known as the chapter of the cow. This surah begins with the huruf al-muqatta'at, isolated letters. Alif, Lam, Mim. These letters are referred as isolated letters as they are read individually and are not joined. The fact that this surah begins with huruf al-muqatta'at, the meanings of which are not known except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to express the eloquence and rhetoric of the Quran, that these 3 letters, which in fact make up a single word, cannot be resembled or matched by the entirety of the Arabs, despite their renown for sophisticated literacy, works and poetry. And because none knows the meanings of these letters except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another benefit which we can understand from this is that the secrets of the Quran will only be unveiled upon the one first acknowledge his weakness and the power, might and knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The qualities of the believers. Some qualities of the believers have then been enumerated. They believe in the unseen, for example, in heaven and hell, and those matters whose wisdom they may not understand yet. They still believe in them. They establish salah, they pay zakat and give charity. They bring faith upon the Quran and all the previous scriptures, and they believe in the hereafter. Then the descriptions of the hypocrites is mentioned. They deceive, spread corruption in the land, and harbor envy, pride, and avarice in their hearts. They mock the injunctions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then presents 2 examples of the hypocrites. The vagrancy of the Prophet Adam alayhi salam is then mentioned, and how he was the first to whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed the honor of being his first vigilant whom was sent upon earth. Number two, Bani Israel and the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them. Bani Israel have been discussed in detail in Surah Al-Baqarah. They were sent a multitude of prophets, peace be upon them all, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were blessed with worldly prosperity. They were saved from the slavery and oppression of the Pharaoh. Foods for heaven were sent down for them in the valley of Sinai. Clouds were sent to shed them. 12 springs were made from a rock for them, and so on and so forth. In gratitude for the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Bani Israel hid the truth. They denied the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. They began worshipping a calf. They unjustly killed the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, peace be upon them all. They broke their covenants. They destroyed the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They became embroiled in mutual enmity and jealousy. They developed an insatiable love for worldly goods and wealth. They harbored enmity for the close angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Despite committing major sins, they would claim only they, the Jews, will enter paradise. The Christians would also say this, a strange way of identifying the killer. Then the Quran makes mention of the well-known incident wherein a person of Bani Israel was killed. The killer was not found. So they went to the Prophet Musa alayhi salam and asked him to supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that he may disclose the identity of the killer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then commanded them to slaughter a cow and to then take a piece of the meat and put it against the body of the one who was killed. Then he will come to life and inform you of his killer. The wisdom behind the slaughtering of the cow. The killer was identified in this way. A group from amongst the Jews denied the resurrection after death. So due to this incident, the evidence was established against them. The love and affiliations the Jews felt for the calf was also refuted. The incident of Harut and Marut. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the angels Harut and Marut knowledge of black magic and sent them to Babel. This was a test to see who would delve into disbelief by using black magic intentionally or knowingly. This was also to teach the people the difference between the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and black magic. The virtues of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and adherence to the Muhammadan Sharia. The people of the book accepted the virtue and rank of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and they would attribute themselves towards him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then extolled the virtues of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and informed them that if they are truthful in their claim, then they should follow and obey the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was the result of the prayer of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he is steadfast upon the way of his forefather Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. The steadfastness of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam in the face of tribulations. The Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was subjected to many tests and trials, but by the grace and favors of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he passed each and every of them. Following the Abrahamic way, towards the end of this chapter, the path and way of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam is mentioned, for the completion of which the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was sent. the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was commanded to call the people towards the religion of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, which is the religion of all of the prophets, peace be upon them all. If the Jews were to bring faith and beliefs as the followers of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam believed the all companion, and the all Ahlul Bayt, then they will be rightly guided. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the ability to follow Islam and to live our lives in accordance to it. Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.